India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide. Because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION. World is one.
Stay connected with the world through WION. Like the page on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter for new alerts. Instagram for videos and images. And the website for the latest news, views and analysis. WIOnews.com. World is one.
Vielleicht nur als 5%.
Hello and welcome. You're watching Gravitas with me, Molly Gampir. Here's a look at what's lined up for you on the show tonight. The Wuhan virus is spreading its tentacles across China. We have been telling you how the ICUs have been filling up, how the country's healthcare system is collapsing, and now its economic hub has fallen prey to this virus. 70% of Shanghai's population is infected, according to a doctor. That's around 20 million people infected. On Gravitas tonight, we decode the extent to which China is going to try and cover up its COVID-19 chaos. How its state media is trying its best to downplay the severity of this virus surge ahead of a key WHO briefing, and how it is once again misleading the world and concealing its crimes. Also on the show for you tonight, Pakistan's economic nightmare is turning more ugly. Desperate Pakistanis are resorting to filling up balloons with cooking gas as the country runs out of the precious resource. The great European heist turns murkier. The EU corruption scandal leaves Europe no longer with the right to give sermons and preach to the world. We call out Europe's hypocrisy. Will South Korea and the US hold joint nuclear exercises? The leaders of South Korea and the US are not on the same page. We tell you what's brewing and how important these exercises would be if they happen. The world is bidding goodbye to its favorite footballer, the legend Pelé. China's financial capital is collapsing. 70% of Shanghai's residents have been infected with the Wuhan virus. I repeat, 70%. That's the claim of a top doctor. Is this doomsday? Well, I don't see why not. Shanghai has a population of 26.3 million. Of them, 20 million people are infected. This is as grim as it gets. And for China, it means a double whammy. Its healthcare takes a hit. Its economy suffers as well. China relies on Shanghai for growth. Shanghai also has the largest GDP of all Chinese cities. We are looking at 4.32 trillion yuan or $679 billion. Shanghai has the world's third largest stock market. Some 800 MNCs have regional or country headquarters here. 70,000 non-Chinese companies have offices here. If Shanghai falls, China's place in the global economy falls. Its claim as the world's factory falls. And guess what? Shanghai has fallen. And China is silent, like it has been for a while now. Silent on the number of cases, silent on the real number of deaths. Too bad China's actions are speaking on Beijing's behalf. The message is one of panic. As I speak, China is carrying out sewage surveillance. What is that? The wastewater from toilets and sinks is being tested. Next question, why? Because some experts believe water data can actually detect infections before clinical data. Does science back this claim? Hardly. But it's not like China is spoiled for choice here. Its healthcare system has clearly collapsed. Else it would not need to snoop around people's wastewater. Think of it this way. If 70% Shanghai residents are infected, what are the chances other cities would be any different? So let's take a conservative estimate. Let's assume that 50% of the people in other cities and counties are infected. That adds up to almost 50% of 1.4 billion. Do the math. The result is a disaster. One that's very much in line with what the world was expecting. Jeffrey Shaman, an epidemiologist at Columbia University, for example, recently told a news outlet that he expects up to 900 million infections in China in 2023. 900 million. Does China have the capacity to cater to the healthcare needs of these many people? The answer is simple, and it is a no. Chinese President Xi Jinping knows that. And so he has conveniently given up, flung open the border gates, and watching the dance of disaster unfold. Chinese propaganda outlets disagree. Allow me to pull out one of today's headlines. China Daily claims China's pandemic fight is praiseworthy. Name one credible country that's praising China. None. Let's get this straight. Everything about China's handling of the Wuhan virus has been disastrous. It hid the outbreak. It hid the virus's origin. Also the inefficiency of its vaccines. And then China's COVID policy boomeranged. But the China Daily insists the visionary leadership of President Xi Jinping has protected the Chinese people from the worst effects of the virus, quote unquote. It wishes. I ask China Daily a very simple question. How does it explain what's happening in Shanghai? The city had its share of draconian lockdowns. For 2 months, the residents were locked up, many without basic necessities. The promise that was sold to them was that the lockdown was necessary to avert a disaster. Few months on, 70% of the residents are sick. And I'll tell you why. Because the only thing China's zero COVID policy has achieved was to delay the infections. Delay is the key word here. all this while, China's plan has been to push the impact of the Wuhan virus into the future. And now that future has arrived, and China's funeral homes are full. We have been showing you those videos. What's happening in China today is because Xi Jinping was too proud to accept vaccines made elsewhere, too proud to ask for help or respect the rules.
我们愿同国际社会加强沟通。
We also believe that the entry restrictions that some countries imposed only on China lack scientific basis. Some excessive practices are simply unacceptable.
一些过度做法。
Sounds ironic when China talks about scientific unknowns, does it not? And speaking of scientific unknowns, on the first day of the year, Global Times said the infection peak is expected to end soon. As early as, quote-unquote, around New Year Day. This was on the first day of the year. And Global Times backed its confusing claim with an unnamed mathematical model. It is the 3rd of January and the Wuhan virus has infected the dragon's den. Patients are flooding the hospitals. In Shanghai, the city's elderly are gasping for breath. They have cramped hospital corridors.
A new wave of significant data has come out after the reopening. There will be some data that is not reported. There is definitely no way around this.
China knows that too well. It has deployed Chinese state media to hide the truth with fake news. The People's Daily quoted a vice president of a Beijing hospital as saying, severe and critical illnesses account for 3% to 4% of infected patients currently admitted to designated hospitals in Beijing. Another hospital official from Sichuan apparently said just 46 patients were admitted to the ICU in 3 weeks. Now, my question to China is simple. Who exactly are you trying to kid here? China's financial capital is collapsing, but its best friend is collapsing all over. No points for guessing, I'm talking about Pakistan. Such is the dire state of this country that its government is failing to provide its people the most essential of commodities, like cooking gas. Look at this video. What do you see? These plastic bags have cooking gas. People are storing LPG in plastic bags because there aren't enough gas cylinders. If you follow this show daily, then you already know that there isn't much gas left in Pakistan. Dr. Asim Hussain, the country's former petroleum minister, has said that it's almost certain that natural gas will be exhausted in Pakistan by next year. In Karachi, people are complaining about no gas. Those who still have supply say that the pressure of the gas coming into their kitchen is far too low to cook the meals properly. And these problems are not limited to the low-income neighborhoods, mind you. They have spilled to the affluent areas of Karachi as well. Local media reports saying that families are being forced to replace breakfast with tea and biscuits because there is not enough gas to boil an egg. It's something most of us will not be able to relate to. But this is the reality of Pakistan. Such is the desperation that gas is being sold illegally in these plastic bags. And why is there a gas crunch in Pakistan, you ask? Because its gas reserves are shrinking. Reports say no new reserve has been discovered in 20 years. Balochistan is expected to have reserves, but which country or company would want to invest in digging a troubled province? Now, what do countries that don't have enough money do? They buy. But buying requires money. and Pakistan has none. Its foreign exchange reserves are dwindling at a time when energy prices are sky high. And the result is this: the government's incompetence is pushing people to the edge. How often do you see images like this coming out from a country? When they do, it's safe to say the country's government has failed. Very soon, it will also fail to keep the railways running. Reports say Pakistan's railways only has enough oil to last 2 days, meaning come Thursday, the trains running in Pakistan may be forced to pull the brake and switch off the engine. If you think something like this will be unprecedented, I urge you to think again. Not too long ago, Pakistani railway was left with only 1 day's oil. And guess what it did? Pakistan was forced to stop goods trains, especially those running between Karachi and Lahore. Employees are getting their salaries almost 20 days after the payday. In December, train drivers had to stop the trains in protest because their salary was credited late. Finally, the department was forced to pay drivers in 2 installments. The Pakistani railway has collapsed. Officials, in fact, saying the department is mirroring the situation of the government. Earlier today, Pakistan announced that markets in the country would be closing sooner than usual. Same with wedding halls, because there is no energy to keep them running. So shops will have to pull down their shutters at 8:30 p.m. and wedding halls will have to shoo out the guests by 10 p.m. tops. Pakistan will soon be asking the government employees to work from home just so that the government buildings can save energy. All of this is part of Pakistan's National Energy Conservation Plan. The country's defense minister urged the people to embrace the measures, adding that the government is leading from the front. How exactly? He says no lights were on during the cabinet meeting today. That's a result of poor planning. Pakistan's government has failed to keep the lights on, and now its legitimacy is hanging by a thin thread. When I said Pakistan is collapsing all over, I meant its economy is just as bad as its political and security situation. Pakistan could be on the verge of splitting again. The Tehreek-e-Taliban has taken control of parts of territory in Pakistan's western frontier region. And what's more, the TTP has also announced a parallel government. This government has a cabinet, a defense ministry, a minister of education, even economic affairs. Which areas does the TTP control? Peshawar, Malakand, Mardan, Dera Ismail Khan, Banu Kohat. Yesterday, the Taliban leader, Ahmad Yasir, decided to troll Pakistan. He shared a photo of Islamabad surrendering to India after the 1971 war. It was a harsh reminder of the last time Pakistan had split and Bangladesh had become independent. The photo was a reminder of the déjà vu that's likely to follow soon. A déjà vu that we coincidentally happened to have told you about at length yesterday. Let's now talk about what's happening in Europe. The EU likes to call itself the champion of transparency and accountability. It loves to preach to the world. There is no dearth of sermons coming from that part of the world on so-called European values. Its favorite hobby is to lecture other countries on ethics, principles, and standards. Let me tell you what the EU needs to do at this point. It needs to look within, because the rot within is only deepening. We have been telling you about the great European heist, the corruption scandal that has sent shockwaves across Europe. To say that it has left Europe embarrassed would be an understatement. It all started with the arrest of Eva Kaili. We told you about her when the scandal first came to light. A 44-year-old member of the European Parliament, she is accused of accepting large sums of money to peddle influence for Qatar and Morocco at the European Parliament. Investigative agencies found 150,000 euros in cash from her flat, which the prosecutors believe came from Qatar and Morocco. Her partner, Francesco Giorgi, is also in custody, and he has been accused of money laundering and creating a criminal organization. He has even confessed to a role in the bribery network. Kylie has been denying all charges. Kylie's father, in fact, was also caught with 600,000 euros in cash. Now, it turns out the arrest of Eva Kaili was just the tip of the iceberg, just Act 1 of this murky corruption saga. There are more names that are surfacing now. After Eva Kaili, 2 more members of the European Parliament are in the probe net. The EU Parliament has now moved to waive immunity of these 2 MEPs after a request from the Belgian judiciary. Every member of the European Parliament is given parliamentary immunity, like in most parliaments around the world. It prevents them from being sued, arrested, or investigated. The European Parliament has announced that its chief, Roberta Metsola, has launched an urgent procedure to lift the immunity of 2 MEPs. Metsola has asked all services and committees to make the process of lifting immunity a priority, aiming to have it finished by the 13th of February. And this move is in response to a probe by the Belgian law enforcement into the graft allegations linked to Qatar and Morocco. Though the Parliament did not give out the names of the lawmakers, multiple reports citing sources are saying that they are Belgian Marc Tarabella and Italian Andrea Cozzolino. The President of the European Parliament tweeted there will be no impunity. Both the members being investigated are from the centre-left Social and Democrats grouping in the Parliament. Marc Tarabella is the Vice Chair of the European Parliament's Delegation for Relations with Arab Peninsula. He is also the Co-Chair of the Parliament's Sports Group. And that's a key post in the run-up to Qatar hosting the Football World Cup. Reports say Tarabella's home was searched by the Belgian authorities on the 10th of December. 3 days later, he was suspended from the Belgian Socialist Party. Tarabella has denied any wrongdoing and said that he supports the lifting of his immunity if it is requested. Andrea Cozzolino is an Italian MEP who chairs the European Parliament's Delegation for Relations with Maghreb countries, including the EU-Morocco Joint Parliamentary Committee. Cozzolino was suspended from the Italian Democratic Party on the 16th of December. Francesco Giorgi, the arrested MEP and also Eva Kaili's partner, like I said, worked as Cozzolino's advisor on the Middle East and North Africa. Giorgi is currently in prison and charged by the Belgian police. The Parliament will now officially kickstart a long-drawn procedure for removing legal protection for Tarabella and Cozzolino. The move to waive the immunity of the 2 MEPs comes after multiple raids by the Belgian police led to the recovery of cash worth $1.6 million. The suspicion is that the money was tied to alleged corruption in the European Parliament, benefiting Qatar. Qatar has denied having a role in any wrongdoing. Authorities also suspect that Morocco tried to bribe MEPs to obtain information about a European Parliament investigation into the use of Pegasus spyware. Now, as fresh details continue to emerge, this scandal has completely shaken the roots of the European Union. More questions are waiting to be answered. One of the biggest ones is this: what right does the EU have now to give out sermons? European leaders systematically took bribes from countries to speak in their favor. For how long can Europe portray itself as the champion of accountability, as a shining beacon of transparency, and lecture other countries? Its behavior is riddled with hypocrisy, but today it stands exposed. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un entered the new year with a vow. He has sworn to mass-produce battlefield nuclear weapons. And this spells bad news for South Korea and the US. At such a time, one would expect the allies to be on the same page. But the leaders of the US and South Korea are making contradictory statements. They don't seem to be on the same page. Yoon Suk-yeol says that the US and South Korea are discussing joint nuclear exercises, but Biden has denied having any such discussions. What's really going on here? Our next report bringing you the details.
North Korea is amping up its nuclear arsenal. Leader Kim Jong-un has called for developing new intercontinental ballistic missiles that would be capable of striking the US mainland. He has vowed to mass-produce battlefield nuclear weapons, which would target South Korea. Experts say Kim aims to use his enlarged weapons arsenal for concessions. Western sanctions are a prominent example. Such a bid from Kim Jong-un was bound to raise concerns. In recent months, North Korea had already fired several missiles off its east coast. The missiles had enough range to hit the US mainland and Japan. So what is the US doing about it now? And what is South Korea's stance? Being North Korea's closest neighbor, South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol has claimed that South Korea and the US are in talks on exercises involving US nuclear assets. Basically, discussions on joint planning and exercises involving US nuclear assets to counter North Korea's nuclear threats. But when Biden was asked a question about whether he was currently discussing joint nuclear exercises with South Korea, he said no. He denied having any such discussions. You see, South Korea doesn't own nuclear weapons. It is under an American nuclear umbrella, meaning it relies on the US for protection from nuclear weapons. The nuclear umbrella guarantees a devastating American response if any of its allies is attacked. But questions loom regarding the effectiveness of such a security commitment. The sole decision to use the US nuclear weapons lies with the US president. Does it ensure enough security for its allies? President Yoon has said that while the US nuclear weapons belong to the US, planning, intel sharing, and drills must be jointly conducted with South Korea. And seeing the current levels of US security commitment, he finds it difficult to assure his people of a security guarantee. Clearly, there is some miscommunication between Seoul and Washington. But what is the reason for this? Experts are speculating that the allies are using unofficial channels to discuss the topic. This could allow South Korea to claim discussing the issue, and at the same time it could allow Washington to deny it. Both the US and South Korean presidential offices have denied any contradiction between the Biden and Yoon comments. The US says since South Korea is not a nuclear weapons state, it cannot technically participate in joint nuclear exercises, although they will explore working together to strengthen deterrence against North Korean threats. Meanwhile, Kim Jong-un is not only expanding the North Korean nuclear arsenal, but he is also planning to develop a missile with quick nuclear counterstrike capability. United States and South Korean drills would focus on responding to a nuclear attack. If North Korea ever goes ahead with it, the drills are essentially conducted to check a country's response arrangements to possible nuclear and radiological emergencies. After all, the response time is the most important factor in the event of a nuclear attack. Seeing Kim Jong-un's increasing threats, US and South Korea need to brace for possible attacks, while North Korean threats have escalated tensions. How credible are they in real terms?
Are they close to what happened in Hiroshima and Nagasaki? Experts believe Kim Jong-un knows better than that. But as he continues to stockpile nuclear weapons, the tensions continue to escalate, leaving the Korean peninsula on the edge.
Three years ago, on this day, Iran's top security and intelligence commander, Major General Qasem Soleimani, was killed in a US drone strike near the Baghdad International Airport. Soleimani was a hero for thousands of Iranians, but a terrorist for the United States. He was killed on the orders of the Trump administration. Let me first give you some background here. Qasem Soleimani was the top commander of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. He led the Revolutionary Guard's Quds Force, which is the foreign-facing branch of Iran's powerful security apparatus. He worked closely with Iraqi and Lebanese allies. He nurtured proxy forces. He aimed to form a Shiite axis of power throughout West Asia. Soleimani played a pivotal role in shaping the Syrian civil war and tightening Iran's grip on Iraq. He carried out waves of militia attacks against Israel. Iranians lauded him as a hero. For them, he was a selfless hero fighting the country's enemies. But for the US, he was quite the opposite. On the 27th of December in 2019, the Iranian military fired rockets on an Iraqi military base in Kirkuk. An American civilian contractor was killed. Several US military service members, along with Iraqi personnel, were injured. And this was the last straw, in a way, for the US. What happened next changed the Iran-US relationship forever. Early on 3rd January in 2020, General Qasem Soleimani arrived at the Baghdad International Airport from Syria. He was with the senior officials from Iran-backed Iraqi Shia militias when an MQ-9 Reaper drone rained missiles on the convoy. Then US President Donald Trump admitted that he had ordered the strike. He said he was trying to stop a war between the US and Iran. Trump asserted that Soleimani was plotting imminent and sinister attacks on American diplomats and military personnel. The move that was supposed to prevent a war, according to Donald Trump, ended up escalating tensions. Iran declared 3-day national mourning to honor Qasem Soleimani. The Iranian leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei paid tributes to him as a martyr. He warned of vigorous vengeance, describing Soleimani as the international face of resistance. The Iranian president also echoed the threat. The US was accused of rogue adventurism by Iran. Iranian leaders called the attack an act of international terrorism. And 5 days after the killing, Iran fired ballistic missiles at 2 Iraqi military bases hosting US forces. No American troops died, but more than 100 suffered traumatic brain injuries. UN experts called Soleimani's killing unlawful. They said the US had no evidence that Soleimani was planning an imminent attack against American interests. 3 years on, Iran is still angry over the death of its hero. The Iranian military has said that Muslim youth around the world will never stop seeking revenge.
We came today to stress on Iraq's sovereignty and demand the withdrawal of all foreign forces, whether American, Turkish or any other. We demand full sovereignty through the withdrawal of all foreign forces from Iraqi territories.
The Iranian embassy in Islamabad has accused the US of hypocrisy. It says that Soleimani's killing violated basic international laws and human rights. Iran is commemorating Major General Qasem Soleimani on his 3rd death anniversary. West Asia is trying to portray him as a hero, a martyr who died trying to protect his country. But this is in sharp contrast to the Western narrative. In fact, the UK is set to designate Iran's Revolutionary Guard as a terror group, the same group that Soleimani belonged to. And this comes as anti-hijab protests continue to rage in Iran. Last week, Iran's Revolutionary Guards arrested 7 people with links to the UK. Britain's Premier Rishi Sunak has urged Iran to stop detaining dual nationals. He has slammed Iran for using the arrest to obtain diplomatic leverage. There are 2 sides to the story. Both the West and West Asia are trying to sell their stories and narratives to the world. While Iran celebrates Soleimani as a hero, the US has justified his killing as an act to eliminate terrorism. America's attack and Iran's retaliation both have been deemed unlawful by the UN. Both have violated human rights. The incident frayed the ties between the 2 countries, and 3 years on, the debate still continues. We turn to Sri Lanka now, a country that has come up with a new austerity measure, a new plan to save money. What is the plan? Stop offering government jobs. You heard that right. The government of Sri Lanka is freezing hiring. And this nudge came from the IMF, the International Monetary Fund. Earlier, the body had asked Sri Lanka to cut down its government jobs. The government of President Ranil Wickremesinghe obliged. One, it decided to reduce the retirement age. Previously, a government employee would retire at the age of 65. Now it's 60. And as a result, some 20,000 Lankan civil servants retired in December. That's 8 times more than the previous year. 8 times more. It's a record number, one that Lankans are not proud of. But it is the need of the hour. Sri Lanka needs an IMF bailout of $2.9 billion. And IMF needs an assurance from Colombo that Sri Lanka can achieve debt sustainability. And so, Lanka has revised the taxes, almost doubled the income tax, doubled the corporate tax, also made electricity dearer. Guess by how much? 65%. And now it is freezing government recruitment. Like all of you already know, 2022 was a rather testing year for Sri Lanka. The country was thrown into the depths of an economic crisis, courtesy years of mismanagement, corruption, flawed policy. In 2022, Sri Lanka ran out of sufficient foreign reserves. There was a budget deficit. Colombo lost access to the capital markets. It went on to default on debt as well. The economy collapsed. The country ran out of food, fuel, essential medicines. The pandemic only made matters worse. Protests erupted. The protesters chanted, "Gotta go home." And then President Gotabaya Rajapaksa was forced to flee Sri Lanka. Reports say the ousted president has applied for US citizenship. Now, I don't know how many of you know this, but Gotabaya was once a US citizen. Here's a quick flashback. Before entering politics, Gotabaya was in the Sri Lankan army. He took early retirement. And in 1998, he moved to the US. In 2005, Gotabaya returned to Sri Lanka and eventually had to give up his American passport. And why is that? Because in Sri Lanka, a dual citizenship holder cannot contest elections. In 2019, Gotabaya was running for office. 3 years later, he is running pillar to post for a safe haven. In July last year, Gotabaya fled Sri Lanka and landed in the Maldives. But Mali did not give him asylum. Gotabaya then traveled to Singapore. And there as well, he wasn't given asylum. Next, Gotabaya went to Thailand. By the 2nd of September, the ousted president was back home in Sri Lanka. And reports say he has now turned to the US. In fact, that is where he is at the moment. On the 27th of December, Gotabaya left for the US via Dubai. He was accompanied by his wife, son, daughter-in-law, and grandchild. The family boarded an Emirates flight in the wee hours, and he is now hoping that the US restores his citizenship. Gotabaya reportedly initiated the paperwork in August 2022. Reports say Washington is yet to consider Gotabaya's request. Now imagine this. You are working on a write-up that needs to be submitted ASAP. You are up against a tight deadline. You've got your coffee, you've put on your headphones and are typing away. But a few minutes later, an email notification pops up on your screen. It's a reminder for a meeting which is scheduled to take place in 2 hours, for which you need to make an important call to figure out final details regarding a plan that needs to be sent. The next thing you know, you are stuck in a whirlpool of thoughts. And right when you come out of that, your phone pings. It's a text message from a friend about her birthday lunch plans. Oops, you totally forgot you'll be heading out tomorrow to buy baking items to bake her cake. Which flavor should you bake? What will you be wearing? You see what just happened here? You are trying to focus on what you are doing, and snap, you lose your focus. All thanks to an email alert, or a notification, or a call. Technology and concentration are not exactly the best of friends. It's a complicated relationship. The fact is, attention is turning out to be an increasingly rare commodity. Our attention spans are going down. While there is no consistent way of measuring attention or what's called deep thinking, there is clearly a problem. Just have a look at what this study reveals. Last year, the Centre for Attention Studies at King's College London found that 49% of 2,000 adults surveyed felt that their attention span was shorter than it used to be. And 47% agreed that deep thinking has become a thing of the past. Distraction is a menace which has been increasingly making its presence felt. You see, there are two schools of thought as far as attention is concerned. One says we need not be blamed for our dwindling ability to focus, but technology instead has taken that basic luxury away from us, so technology needs to be blamed. The second school of thought does not believe in this. It says that we ourselves are to be blamed, that it's all about self-control. If we are willing to be distracted, we will fall prey to pings and notifications. We will be easily lured by technology. So does that mean we villainize technology, or do we blame ourselves for lack of self-control? Well, there is no easy answer to that. We know that our lives today depend on technology. It is our lifeline. We cannot imagine our lives without it. So what you can do is to find the right balance. Milk the benefits of technology without compromising on your productivity. Do you work better in the morning hours, when your phone is on silent, or when notifications don't distract you? Figure out when you are at your productivity peak. If you find yourself mindlessly scrolling through your social media feed, ask yourself why you're doing that. The key, as with a lot of things in life, is to find that right balance. Attention is a valuable resource and must be spent wisely.